Hi, everybody. Welcome back, LaraChat Live, episode 5. The network has not canceled us yet, so thank goodness for that. So today we had a couple different topic ideas, but unfortunately, real life and work prevented us from really fleshing out those ideas, and so we pivoted, famous words. So what we wanted to do today was look at a bit of how teams operate. So getting away from the PHP coding, programming logic theory, all that stuff. How do we operate as a team? Mike and Dylan are both freelancers. Adam works for a company. I work for a company. We have clients. We have developers that we work with. How do we work together to bring a project from start to finish or take over a project? Get some feedback from these guys. We'll also talk about the NPM issue with that kick package that got removed from NPM and what would happen in the composer slash Laravel world if something got removed there. And Adam has a show and tell for us, and then beyond that, we'll open up the floor to our community for community discussion, which can be had on our Slack chat, and the YouTube chat window. Feel free to send us a message on the Front Porch channel or DM one of us, and hope we answer. So start off with the guys. We got Adam, Dylan, and Mike, and myself, Sean. So let's start off with a look at how teams operate. One of the questions I wanted to ask, what are some of the common issues that teams face when it comes to working on, let's say, a project? I'd like to get some experience from both sides of the table here. Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, oh, sorry, I had myself muted. I was trying to frantically figure out how to unmute myself. One of the things that I experienced in a past life as a project manager was that you need to get management buy-in for it to work at all. If management doesn't buy in to the project management style, say if you're in a traditional team that worked on the waterfall method, and all of a sudden you're trying to do agile, like morning stand-ups, they were actually viewing the morning stand-up meetings as wasted man hours. Say we had 9 people on the team, that was 9 hours that were wasted because we're all trying to get on the same page. And so I guess one of the things is to get management and talking the same language, and then because when management buys in, then the team will buy in as well, because then you have the blessing. If you don't have the blessing from management, the team kind of doesn't really accept it either, and it causes a weird friction where you're trying to catch up to the projects all the time and trying to keep everybody on the same page. So I think management buy-in is probably the first thing you need if you have something that's different from what was done before.
Yeah, that's kind of like the unspoken part of tech that we love to talk about the newest technologies, love to talk about the newest tools, but you got to communicate that to your client. If you want to use something new or a different approach than what they're used to, you have to be good at communicating. And there's not a whole lot of tutorials and guides on here's how to approach the situation. It's kind of like on a per client basis, but yeah, I think having management on your side is huge, and to have the ability to break down what you're trying to do in terms that a non-tech person can understand is a huge skill, and I think people should pay attention more to that.
You know, it's funny you say that. I think that not only applies when you're talking to a non-tech person, but it also applies when you're talking to a tech person, especially about new technologies. So, for instance, just a couple months ago, I was recommending a Docker-based environment for our on-site deployments, and we ended up agreeing that is the way to go. But I was explaining the technology to a colleague of mine, and he shut down and stopped the train on that discussion because he was in a bad mood, but also B, he's the type of person who you need to maybe show him something and maybe give him something to read, and he needs to grok that on his own time, let it settle in his mind, and then maybe reevaluate later. Whereas myself, I'm a go, go, go. Like, hey, look, this can offer this, this, and this. I don't have it all mastered yet, but let's spend the time to master it. I get very excited. So you find that you have, especially in our industry, people who communicate in such different ways, and they've got different baggage from their childhood that just causes them to approach things in different ways. That's something that we really need to be aware of as developers, especially when we're collaborating on a team, because it's not always, and I struggle with that the most, I think, because it's just not always a straightforward conversation to have,
And it's also hard to keep that in mind and be forgiving of that when you're coming up against friction. Maybe not malevolent friction, but something that's not quite in your thought frequency. And say my immediate reaction is to say, why the hell isn't that guy thinking that way? When in reality I need to say, okay, wait a second, he might just need a few minutes and whatever. Let everybody process it on their own time.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought, because I had a meeting earlier today, and we were going over the planning of one of our apps, and I wanted to approach it from an entirely high-level, discussion, and my developer wanted to get more into the meat and potatoes of the model, the database, all that stuff. And I just wanted to do the high level, make sure he understands what we're doing, and then he can handle all of the code, because I trust him to do that. But we kind of had a little bit of a difference of opinion there, and my first mindset was like, wait a minute, this guy is going off the script I want to do. I need to shut him down. But I kind of stopped myself and asked him, why do you want to do it this way? Do you need me to go with the models with you to make you feel more comfortable with them? Do you need me to go through the views and all the different potential scenarios? And he said yes. So instead of me shutting him down and saying, do it my way and go sit down, I think we had a much more collaborative discussion where he came out understanding way more than what he originally understood. So definitely understanding the learning abilities of the person, the way they learn, are they visual, oral, etc. And then also making sure to take the time to, and this was told to me from my mother-in-law of all people, is be curious. So be curious about why the person is pushing back, why this person is saying, hey, I would rather do it this way. There's usually a reason behind it. And let's all be quiet at once.
I was just waiting for someone else to go. The hard part about that, you were talking about, you were discussing with a coworker at work. When you're a freelancer and you're remote, that's kind of hard when you're just talking over Slack. And there sometimes comes to a point where you're like, hey, do you have 2 seconds so I can call you? If it's another developer, I'm talking about another developer. Can I just call you and walk you through my thought process here? And that goes way farther than just trying to type out code on Slack. Oh my gosh, it's so much quicker. And there's something about having a voice in the end of the line. You could tell more emotion. It's just you don't think of emotion during talking about tech or code, but to understand where they're coming from, it's huge. If you're not comfortable with the phone, I don't think you should freelance. Long story short.
So one of the other questions, communication is a big thing. So one of the other things I wanted to kind of go over was, when you receive a project, do you prefer to have a project to start from scratch, or are you okay with taking over an existing project and continuing development, knowing that the business may not want to refactor, they may want you to continue down the road that it already has started? Now that may be good or bad, and I think a lot of freelancers will have that kind of impact on their business more so than someone who works at a company and built a company product. Curious what you guys thoughts are when you receive a project like that.
I was freelancing on a project a while back, and they had a ton of stuff already in place, and I was coming in as just additional labor, and I hated it. Hated every minute of it. They asked me to do things like, I'm going to send you a super huge nested JSON blob, and I want you to go through and update the database, and it's like 5 different models, and it's all nested, and update the relationships, and they said, I want one route to do all of that, and I cringed. Because of the way they were approaching it. It was a very front-end heavy application, and they were just with a ton of crappy jQuery, and I'm like, use Angular at the time. I'd say use Vue nowadays. So I hate coming in and collaborating on existing projects, but then again, you got to keep in mind our industry is saturated with egotistical maniacs who only think that their way is the best way, or they think inside their own box, and I think that's just the nature of our people, if you will, that we struggle with being humble enough to be okay with working on somebody else's code. Maybe I'm just the jackass of this, excuse me, maybe I'm just the loser, the mean guy of the group, but I know that that's something that I struggle with, is bringing myself to a point where I can work on somebody else's code, get it to operate within the budget of the client without saying, you guys need to start over because I'm better.
Yeah, and I think...
Go ahead.
And I think in my experience, where the company I work at, we take on projects, and we took on one where it wasn't consistent in the way it was developed, where and it was a WordPress project, so there were pages that relied on the custom post type plugin, and then there were pages that relied on one of a template level page with hard-coded HTML. I mean, it was all over the map. So when we would, let's say there was an FAQ custom post type, and the FAQ appeared in several different sections of the site. So when we changed it in the admin, we then looked at it on the site and realized it didn't update in some sections, and then we had to go back and investigate the time to find out why, and then we found out it's hard-coded. So that's one of the things I think causes a lot of that tension and cringiness, because you really don't know the thought process of that developer, where they may have gone off script or done something that made sense to them, but maybe not for 500 other people. But that one, we ended up looking bad in the end because we thought we could do it in a subset number of hours, and it really ended up exploding in our faces with a lot more hours. So one of the things we've been trying to do is really, as part of the onboarding of a new project or client, is we take the time to research their site, their app, whatever it is, and really try and understand how it's working instead of just going gung-ho and getting our hands dirty. Mike, you were saying?
I was going to go back to that topic on going into existing projects. It's relatively easy to bring up your own new from scratch project. That's pretty easy because you're comfortable in doing that. You do things your way. I think it's kind of character building, and I'm not saying that I'm good at it or anything, but it has helped me grow quite a bit in the past to take on legacy projects and work with them, and maybe even try to make them better if I can. It's kind of a defining quality, I would say, if you can do those things.
Oh yeah, there's so many more opportunities refactoring old code than there is a brand new web app that's established or not established yet. The pay is better, I would assume, but if you can rely on your test suite and refactor code, that's huge, because not only are you helping another company with old code, but in your future releases, in your future code, when it grows in complexity, you can leverage what you learn there and refactor your own stuff and do it confidently. So I think, of course you want to start with a new project and deal with complexity as you learn it because you know it the best, but I think that it would be smart for a new developer to learn from an existing code base, because that's where you see patterns firsthand, and you learn from trial by fire, so to speak.
Right.
No, I definitely agree there. For a new developer, that's almost should be expected to always be learning, and it also goes to the senior developer too, to always be improving to make sure that we're not left behind. I always have the fear 10 years from now, what am I going to be doing? Am I going to be like those COBOL or Fortran guys? I don't know. I'm assuming we don't have a COBOL or Fortran developer here. If we do, I apologize if I offended you. So one of the other things we wanted to get some feedback on is what areas are problematic for you guys when it comes to communication. So in two steps, one being the client and one being your team. I'm curious on the team side, what are some problematic communication areas for you?
Well, I think the biggest thing, let's say client communication. The biggest thing, this is even, I mean, it goes for team communication too, especially for remote workers. Unvoiced or uncommunicated expectations that are assumed to be true, but not recognized by both parties. And so one party will say that's a given, and the other party will say, well, you never said that. And I think that happens a lot, and that's why, especially if you're freelancing or remote working, you have to be very diligent in how you document things or talk about a project when you're in the design phase, so that you don't go off on a tangent and a week's worth of work is for nothing. So I guess my summary on that is expectations, managing expectations, and recognizing that you need to always ask more than you think you know. Ask for more details.
Yep. On that note, I love doing wireframes before committing to a feature because it makes it very clear to both parties that it's going to look something like this. Like, you don't have to spend a whole lot of time on it, but it works wonders because the client sees it firsthand, and you finally put your ideas on paper, and it kind of gives you like something to shoot for. So
like a little checklist, a task list. If your wireframe has become your task list, basically, that as you go through development, you fulfill each wireframe. Okay, I'm there. I got that one. Next one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Curious if Adam had any thoughts here.
Yeah. So I find, well, I have another story about when I was freelancing. I was freelanced by the IT development staff of a company. So there was the company who was the client, the end client, I guess you could say, and then there was this IT support staff sitting in between me and the client. And they had a very interesting role because they're, oh, pardon the sun, good Lord. They are IT developers themselves, and they know Laravel, excuse me, and they have a good understanding of what technologies are available to us, and yet they also understood the business logic. They understood the needs of the business from top to bottom because they work at that company. So there was a communication path between this IT guy and the company. And he was able to translate those requirements into what they could tell me, what I could understand, what I could implement. And they know things like, oh, you need to create a model that has these properties. They can tell me those sort of things, whereas the end client can't. So there were two lines of communication there that were very different, but worked together to create a product that worked for them. And we actually, at my company, we're now kind of moving towards that organization as well, whereas one of the other developers is moving into a project management role. He goes on site, he understands the requirements of the business, and then translates and communicates them to myself. So I've always valued that middleman, if you will. A lot of people don't like middlemen, but I do because I hate stupid people. So, I don't like working with a client because they don't know what they want. And I think very pragmatically. I think like a developer. I think like a database. I think like a Laravel application. Whereas they're thinking like, oh, and then I need to be able to click this button and magic happens. And, so having somebody in the middle is something I found very helpful. So I would recommend to freelancers out there, if you're getting to that point where you're finding that the communication between you and your client is breaking down because maybe you have too many clients, hire somebody to be your middleman. Hire a developer who knows Laravel, who knows how you operate as a developer, and that might take time, but also that person should also be able to sit down and just work with the client, learn their business logic top to bottom so that they can translate the requirements and maybe produce a spec document for you that you guys can agree upon. I find, at least for me, and maybe it's my communication skills or lack thereof, that middleman really proves to be quite useful for me.
So what you're describing is a human middleware.
Exactly.
Because if there wasn't stupid people in the development world, we wouldn't need validation. That's a terrible joke. I'm so sorry. But yeah, I particularly liked communicating to the client because I can break down terms. I used to do IT support, so I used to have to basically unveil the magic all the time. But if you're not really into that, hiring someone who's good at talking with people would be a great route to handle that.
That can also be detrimental, though, if you have a person in that position that's not really qualified for it, or that doesn't convey the whole client truth back to the developers. That could cause another rift. So it could be a double-edged sword.
Yeah, I agree there. I was actually thinking, with as Adam was talking there, I was kind of thinking that, man, there might have, made a new level of freelancer that our community might end up wanting to offer themselves as, not just a developer, but a project management developer, a technical manager of sorts, and going out and offering their services like that. I can actually see people, wanting that, but like Mike said, that, yeah, it is a double-edged sword, but it's just as much of a double-edged sword as it is, me hiring any one of you guys to develop a project for me, and I don't communicate it well, or we have a breakdown in technical communication. I think it works both ways, whether you're the developer or the manager person.
Well, and I think the important thing to emphasize is, at least for me, it was more beneficial to have somebody who was a developer themselves. Maybe they weren't very good, maybe they just dabbled, but enough to where they understood what a model is and they understand what sort of database relationships you're able to accomplish and maybe the value of an event listener, those sorts of things, so that they can translate and speak that language for you. Because if you find a project manager who's just a project manager, that's going to be detrimental. Like Mike was saying, you got to have that balance, and I think having somebody who's just a project manager is dangerous.
What I did value in the project managers that I did work with is if they were impartial to the technology, where they knew technology to explain it, but they didn't inject their own views on how it should be implemented. So where they could communicate with the client, they could communicate with the developers, but not skew the development process. But yeah, that's it.
Pretty interesting thoughts. I'm gonna think about this because, interesting. Because at my current role, I do a lot of the management of the tech team, and it's an ongoing process where I try and improve that because I'm coming from a technical background, not a project management background. So sometimes there are communication breakdowns, and learning more about this side of things it's interesting to a degree. So if we're good on this topic, if nobody has any other stories or thoughts they want to share about it, we can move over to our other discussion topic, being the composer/npm issue. Are you guys good to move on, or?
Oh yeah, I love this topic. This is fun.
Okay, so basically, a little backstory about what happened, and this is going off memory here. The package name was Kik, it's K-I-K, and I think I can't remember, there's a left pad, I can't remember exactly here, but long story short, it broke the internet almost. So if anybody was using NPM and they were relying on that left pad functionality, it was removed, thus breaking a lot of packages. And So we can get Dylan to kind of expand a little bit more about what happened there. But one of the big things we're definitely really curious about is what happened if somebody who relies on Composer to pull in packages. So let's say Laravel, for example, relies on Carbon. So what happened if Carbon just ceases to exist via GitHub or Composer? And what happens? What do we do? What's the fallback? Does Composer prevent a person from doing that? So one of the things the NPM team did is I believe they prevented people from removing a package once it was uploaded, or maybe I'll pass that over to
They
you.
force republished his package under the same namespace, under the same name. So he removed his stuff, and since NPM it doesn't have that kind of failsafe in case somebody removes something, they just said, okay, we just got to republish everything. They took his source code from GitHub and just basically republished it with the same name. That could happen in Composer, but you can also patch with Composer, so I'm not super worried about it. The interesting part is how the developer handled the situation. He got a lawsuit, or sorry, not a lawsuit, but a request to change his name from Kik to something else from the company called Kik, which existed well before his package was made, and his package only had a few dependents. And rather than sell the name like you would sell a website, which I think would be the most common thing to do, he decided to say, nah, and he said some like 5-word response and basically told him to screw off. And they said, fine, we can do a lawsuit, whatever. But NPM already has a policy in place for this kind of situation. So they told the developer, hey, we're going to have to go on their side because they're a company, they own the trademark. I mean, it's open source, but there's still law. Like, it's not in the middle of cyberspace land. Like, people still get involved. It's a people thing. So he was forced to remove. He was not forced to remove, but rename. And his response is to say, hey, screw all of NPM. I'm going to unpublish all my packages and cause this whole fiasco. It's crazy. I don't think it'll happen again, but it's crazy.
Hey, Dylan, when you said that Kik only had a couple dependencies, did you mean like dependencies on other libraries? Is that what you meant?
No, sorry. I meant as in like other people were using it. Like Kik, the instant messaging software that the company Kik actually has millions and millions of users. The Kik NPM package only had a couple people using it at the time. This guy, the author, had many packages, and Kik was just one of them. He had another package called LeftPad, also it's called a micro package. It's only 12 lines of code, and all it does is add left padding to a string. And all these people were using it in there as a dependent in the JavaScript world because everything needs to be a micro package in JavaScript to make up for missing stuff. So when he unpublished his 44 modules, I think it was a significant number of modules, but LeftPad was one of them, and it caused outages in thousands and thousands of applications. Luckily, it was only an hour. It was only an hour that this was a problem. But one advantage Composer has over NPM as well is we have a lock file, whereas NPM does not. So if you just run npm install, like you're getting the newest thing. If it doesn't exist, you're screwed. So we have a couple things that Composer can do that Composer does that NPM doesn't do yet. But I feel like this is a big wake-up call to the JavaScript world, and they'll be changing NPM soon to handle this kind of breakdown. But like I said, in my mind, it's minor. It was only for 45 minutes,
Would you be able to expand a bit more on the Composer side of things, of what prevention methods they have in place?
Well, in a way, if you did Composer update, it would fail at that point. But at least you have a lock. At least you have a vendor file that's locked. And you can also, with Composer, you can override a branch. So since that guy's code, the Kik module, was on GitHub, you could create a fork or just have a Composer entry that says load this GitHub URL as this package, and that would temporarily fix it for anybody who was dependent on it. NPM, as far as I know, is you can't do that. So, I mean, you have to do it locally for each installation of this Composer problem, but there is fixes to it.
let's say the worst would happen, and you were depending on a package, and the guy took his GitHub account offline, so the source was gone. You would still have it on your servers. You just couldn't run an update against it, and you'd have to find a solution before you push your next update. Your site would not go down. Your development would be hampered. That's all.
Right. Right.
So to make sure I understand with the NPM side of things, when it runs, does it? And let's say I have LeftPad in there, and when I run npm update, I'm not sure of the command offhand. Does it reinstall all of that, or do I keep my LeftPad package there? How does that work?
In the npm world, install and update are the same thing. So you'd run npm install, and they don't have a lock file. So every single time you run npm install, it performs an update. And since it doesn't exist, it would break.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense. So I see how this all happened a bit better than I did before, where just kind of reading a little bit of the headlines and skimming through, thinking, oh man, yay, more drama. Do you think there's anything that could be improved? Kind of a loaded question, but anything that can be improved Composer-wise to prevent, like we rely on Composer a lot. Any things that you guys think of that could be done better? I'm curious.
Well, I definitely like the lock file, the concept of a lock file. We all know that it allows us to guarantee that our local development copy has cloned the repositories from a certain commit hash. And therefore, when we push that lock file into production, it uses the exact same commit hash. So in theory, if you were to tar the vendor directory and MD5 it, they should be virtually identical. So I like that about Composer, and don't like the fact that NPM doesn't have something similar. Because when people push updates, there could be a breaking change. People don't use semantic versioning as well as they should, especially in smaller, less popular packages. We've all run into the need for, oh, there's this weird thing that does this weird thing that I need, but it's some guy who just created this little thing and put it up there and doesn't maintain it properly. So I do like the Composer lock file and wish NPM would do something like that. I will say, what was it? Oh, I know that if you run a business or if you decide as a freelancer that you need to reuse a bunch of source code, you might want to create a Composer package for that, and there might be a reason to have that private. So you would run something like a Satis repository or a torrent proxy, which can actually proxy to packages and store those local downloads, or store the dist files on your packages, on your torrent proxy. So if GitHub were to be down, in theory, you should still be able to install and run Composer through that, just so long as that cache in your proxy doesn't get lost or expire. So I haven't really worked with it, but I know that exists, and they advertise torrent proxy as, hey, even if GitHub's down, as long as your proxy's up to date, all of your dependencies are going to resolve okay. So that's something that I found interesting, that maybe NPM should consider releasing something like that.
Correct me if I'm wrong, didn't GitHub go down 2-3 months ago for part of a day, an hour or so? I remember trying to do Composer update and being absolutely screwed.
Yeah, that happened.
And it happens all too often. GitHub's great, but they've got downtime issues more often than I'd like to see from a provider as significant as GitHub. And they've been under a lot of fire lately. We could have a whole session, a whole talk on GitHub and the open letter. I don't know if you guys saw it, but GitHub's been under a lot of fire lately, and I would assume that the downtime is contributing to that.
What's this open letter about? I've not heard about it.
I'll link it. Give me a minute. I'll find it and link it.
Cool. Thanks.
So one of the other things that I wanted to ask about, not looking to put words into the mouth of the developer, the NPM developer, but Curious, why did he do it? It almost comes across as immature in the first. At the first reaction, it comes across immature. But I'm curious, what do you guys think about that? Like, if the community relied on your package, would you ever just take it offline completely?
So his rationale, he posted on Medium. He had a Medium post where he explained his rationale behind it. He said that NPM was not truly open source because it was run by a company, and it served in the interests of another company. So therefore, it wasn't open source, and he only wanted his packages on a truly open source solution, which I don't agree with. Like, I agree. It's immature because other people who didn't necessarily see the way you saw open source depend on your project, not just for their own projects, but for their making money, like putting food on the table. This affected a lot of people that had no part in this situation. You just need to, like, open source is a great concept, but there's still money involved. It's still real life, and you kind of have to accept that because that's what makes our field great. I mean, without money, you're still doing it for fun, but that's how we get by. That's just the reality of it.
Yeah, and I guess without money we wouldn't have, and I'm just going to double check real quick here. We had 8,723 members of LaraChat. All these people rely on, well, I'm going to assume Laravel, which is open source. So where does that leave them if they're doing it from scratch themselves?
They go back to CodeIgniter.
No, not. But then, also, I think that's also why a lot of us are comfortable with Taylor, and kind of rehashing an old topic, but Taylor saying that Laravel Spark is going to be a paid application, and we're all okay with it because he's done a great service to the community and providing a great open source software. Now, question on the company side of things. Do you guys think a company should be behind an open source project, or do you think it should be an individual or a non-profit company? I'm curious.
So I wanted to address quick what Dylan kind of said about the developer taking the stuff offline. I think there are two conflicts or two ideas here at struggle. One is the right of the developer to do with his code as he pleases. It's his. And the other is what rights do the end users have that are consuming that, and what expectations do they have? Does the developer give up certain rights as part of like his contract into open source to say, look, at this point it's open source, and after that he has certain responsibilities? Or do the users of that package have to recognize that it's volatile and they're using it at their own peril? Because he's not getting paid for it. He's doing it because he likes doing what he's doing. He should be able to make decisions about his products as he sees fit. If other people have put themselves in a position to where they depend on him and lose money, isn't that their fault? I'm not saying that's the fact. I'm just wondering, what's the discussion about this?
Yeah, that's interesting. I imagine open source to being, once you publish it on an open source format, it's no longer quote unquote yours. You released it to the public. So if you try to take it back from the public, I'm not sure like that's within your rights because you've already given it up. Like when you put it out there on GitHub and someone forks it, it's not yours anymore, so to speak. Like it belongs to other people.
Well, and to me, it sounds like once you start talking from that perspective, it sounds like you're talking about a social contract. And we, as open source developers, we kind of have this social contract amongst us that says, hey, I've released this open source library. I'm going to do my best to make sure that this does what you need it to do. Jeffrey Way on Laravel Snippets, I think is what he calls it. It's his 5-minute podcast that he does for LaraCasts. He had a talk on maintaining open source packages, and he talked about that kind of social contract there. So if this topic interests you, I'd recommend to listen to that, and I can link you to it as well.
Awesome.
So I think we'll kind of step on from this topic because our buddy Adam over here has a little show and tell he wants to do. Adam, are you able to take us through this? I have no clue what it is, and I really hope it's safe for work.
I am. No, it totally is. So I recently purchased a $700 server to have in my office because now I'm working for a company, but I have a couple clients that just my $100 DigitalOcean bill isn't working for me anymore. So I wanted to eliminate my DigitalOcean bill, and so I found myself in a scenario where I've got a production web server sitting in my office, and I'd rather not have ports 22 exposed, ports, SFTP ports and stuff like that. I'd rather keep it kind of more locked down to the public, but I want a back door, and so enter the story of a VPN. And so what I have here is a piece of software called PryTunnel, and it is an open source, self-hosted, really, really stinking easy to use VPN configurator tool. So the way I have mine set up here is I have 3 organizations. One's called Atom, so these are all my personal devices. And then one's called servers, and these are all my servers. I got a Raspberry Pi at home, I got a Mac Mini, the new server I got, and my EdgeMax router are all on the VPN. And then I can spin up a server I attach. So here's my main one. I've got the servers organization and the Atom organization in here. And if you've ever worked with OpenVPN before, you know that there's a lot of weird RSA certificate signing and foolishness, and it's even more complicated than what you think of when you think of a traditional SSL certificate. It's really strange. Maybe that's just my lack of understanding, but what's gorgeous about this is I'm actually just going to take myself off of my VPNs and actually delete the configs and show you how simple it is. Now that I've got my everything organized here in my server, I can just say, okay, well, this is the one I want to connect to, and so I'll take this this client URL, which I'm going to have to make sure I expire, and I can just paste it into here and hit import, and ta-da, it's downloaded the VPN credentials, and I can just simply connect to it, and it just connects. So for someone who has maybe a server at their office or something that you'd like remote access to, having a nice VPN tool like this, it's just so easy to spin up. So if you're interested in VPNs, this was by far the easiest one that I've found. I love that it's self-hosted. I'm paying for a $5 a month Vultr box that's running this. And then for Linux servers, say you've got web servers, you want to block the port 22 on your Forge boxes, for instance, you can just come down here and install their client, their PryTunnel client. With that, you can import the profile URL in the same manner as I did with a Mac app, and there's a Windows app here. So really quick, easy, out-of-the-box VPN for dummies. That's something that has been incredibly useful for me lately. I can even configure my router from home using this tool. So if you need a VPN, PryTunnel, PRITUNL.com. And the install is, I literally just copied their install script. You just add a repository, add the keys, and run apt-get install. So it's really straightforward. Also, one thing that's nice about the interface is once I've got a domain pointing to it, but you go into settings and you type in a domain and it signs an SSL certificate for you using Let's Encrypt. So they keep it all nice and secure for you, even just for accessing the web panel. So yeah, that's my little show and tell.
Very cool.
Yeah, I like that. That is cool. Although my DigitalOcean bill isn't that high, so maybe one day.
Sure. Even if you find that you've got your failed to ban is freaking out because people are trying to get into your port 22, you could block port 22 on the public interface and just have it on this interface. So you got yourself a backdoor and a nice way to increase security. Also, when you originally create a server on here, it adds a route to the server. So I could add a route to my server of 0.0.0.0/0. And if you do that and attach it to this and save it, essentially all of your traffic would be routed through that VPN server when you're connected. So you could use this as a free self-hosted, except of course you got to pay for the server, but a VPN to anonymize all your traffic, even on your iPhone. So you could use that for the anonymity functionality as well. A lot of the VPNs I have found out there that are hosted VPNs are specifically for that purpose, not so much the peer-to-peer VPNs, which is what I need, but this offers both.
Awesome. Very cool. OpenVPN is a pain to set up. I've done it a couple of times.
Yeah, exactly. It is a pain, and this runs OpenVPN. I can actually even pull up the config here. You can see it's just an OpenVPN config file, which I should close. So yeah, it's something I've enjoyed working with quite a bit.
See, we haven't talked about the social contract of displaying your OpenVPN credentials to the internet on a podcast. That's something we haven't touched yet.
Yeah, not quite. I'll probably be regenerating these keys here. I'll just disconnect.
With a personal note, I was actually working on trying to do some tutorial videos, and one of them was setting up some credentials, and I thought, man, how am I gonna share this without being screwing myself over? Yeah, same kind of story, but so thank you for sharing that. That was actually kind of really cool. I'm probably going to be bugging you more. I'll be sending you a DM on Slack to ask some more questions and learn more about it. I'm definitely really interested.
Sure. And the same goes for anybody. If you at Artisan Goose on Twitter, at Adam Goose or Artisan Goose on LaraChat Slack. So I'm more than happy to. If you want me to set up the server for you, I'd be happy to do that. Just reach out.
So you'll come to my house and do everything, right?
You got it.
I'm not paying for the airline ticket.
Then we'll have to talk about that later.
So let's take it into the last part of our show where we open it up to our community members. Some of the questions that were sent to me in DM, someone, Matt, is curious about what host do we all use for our servers. For me personally, there's a mixture because I'm on Amazon Web Services. I'm also on DigitalOcean. One of the company I work for, we use a managed hosting solution to offload some of the work to a company called WiredTree. Used different companies in the past, but my main go-to is always going to be DigitalOcean for something that I need to spin up really quick, and I am not going to have a ton of traffic to do a $5 instance. Beyond that, if there's something that I think will have a good amount of traffic, I will use an Amazon Web Services instance, and that I feel like I can have a bit more experience at scaling that one up and down. And side story, I installed MongoDB on one of my Amazon servers and had it collecting data for one of my SaaS apps, and I forgot to turn it off. And 3 days later, I realized that my box was 98% full with all the MongoDB data, and I actually could not SSH in. It was so full, so I had to go into the Amazon Web Services account and increase the database size so I could get in and stop everything from continuing to explode on me. It definitely sweated cold sweats right then and there. But I think incidents like those are what makes us a real good developer, because we how we act under fire. But back to you guys. Your server preferences.
AWS for life. No, just for as long as it's the best.
I like DigitalOcean, but I can't wait until Taylor gets Vultr incorporated into Forge, because I'm liking Vultr more and more.
What's Vultr?
Vultr.com, VULTR. They're similar to DigitalOcean. They have grown quite a bit in the years and are catching up. They now have block storage where you can put in a minimal server but buy additional storage to add on to it without upgrading your servers to a high monthly fee. And so they have some pretty neat offerings, and their pricing is similar to DigitalOcean, and some of the plans I think you get more for the same price.
Sorry, go ahead.
Lately, Vultr has been valuable to me because I'm running PBX software. So right now, because the PBX software, which I'm sorry, is a public broadcast exchange, just SIP phones, business phones for clients. We're currently running them at a colo because the software has a public just a Linux distro. You can just install it from the ISO, and it installs it, and it works, and they have an official distro. And in fact, all the commercial modules that you can pay for and install are only technically supported on that official distro. So we're running 3 PBX servers at our colo on an Essex box that my IT guys are in charge of. But I like the idea of cloud hosting it. Vultr actually allows you to upload an ISO from a URL. So, and then boot a VM from that ISO. So I went and copied the download URL of that free PBX distro download, can upload that directly into Vultr, and then boot up a new VM from that ISO, which will install on the hard drive, and then you eject the ISO, and ta-da, it works, which is something that DigitalOcean does not have. It's a pain in the butt to accomplish on Amazon, and I think Linode may or may not support it, but I could not get it to work. So the ease of use for that, especially if you're not looking for just a traditional Ubuntu, if there is a distro out there that you want to try in the cloud, you can do that with Vultr, which makes it so that if you wanted OpenSUSE, but they don't support OpenSUSE, you could download the ISO and boot a VM from OpenSUSE. Also, for you weirdos out there, $16 a month for a Windows 10 license on Vultr. So you pay for your box size and then an additional $16 a month, and you can have yourself a Windows 10 server in the cloud.
But didn't you hear that Windows is basically Ubuntu now?
I know, I'm so excited!
Hey, Dylan, can you expand a little bit on how you work with AWS? To me, that's always been very intimidating. The ramp up and the learning curve for managing all those different services. They have like 500 different services you can tie together.
Oh yeah, and they're all great. So I started I was doing IT for a long time before I started doing coding. So I used to doing all the networking and blah blah blah. But it's really not that bad. You could set up an EC2 is your DigitalOcean server. That's its code name, and S3 is your assets. So you could put your pictures on there if you want to host huge files like ISOs. You can do that too. It's just it's just a storage delivery network, and you automatically have a CDN just from uploading to this S3. What's also great is with PHP, you can just have the Amazon Web Services SDK in your Laravel project, and if you do some dynamic stuff, like say my last app, I had to do some machine learning. So I used Amazon Machine Learning, and I had the PHP app talk to the Amazon Machine Learning and retrain the model on an interval with Laravel Scheduler. And it was just great to have all the infrastructure built with code in mind. You can dynamically pull stuff up or change to a MongoDB or use their own DynamoDB or make a warehouse with Redshift. You can just scale on weird applications or weird instances that you didn't really think about. I like it better. I don't know. It's a lot to learn. Higher learning curve for sure, but I like it a lot.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for explaining that.
There's a lot of people that I've talked to in LaraChat who they talk about they're taking the AWS certification, and they want to basically offer AWS support, development, setup as a service. But a lot of people are starting to take advantage of that kind of opportunity. So it's going to be really interesting to see who's going to win that battle. Are there any major AWS as a service companies out there right now?
I mean, if you think about it, all of these services are competing for the same thing, and who the real winner is us, because they're constantly pushing these costs down. What I think we should be careful of, though, is being tied too much to one. Right. If you get used to AWS Lambda and you run your node applications with Lambda, say if you see a better deal somewhere else, good luck trying to transfer it or export it because you're so tied into their infrastructure, your vendor locked in. That's the thing you got to be careful of. more than choosing the right one. You got to be able to switch if you need to.
Anybody out there tried Pagoda Box? I've always been curious, but I never got around to it because the stuff I wanted never worked.
Yeah, I agree. I did try Pagoda Box early on, back in the Laravel 3 days, and neat concept, never had it pan out very well. I don't even remember a lot about it. But for me, every time you and I talk, Mike, about how we can enhance the version 4 of our software, you always say, oh, but that's breaking away from the convention and adding a level of complexity that we don't need. I feel like things like Pagoda Box and Heroku, they're neat, but it breaks away from the convention,
right.
Especially for us. We're in the Laravel community. We have Forge. Thank you, Taylor Otwell. You've saved our lives. We don't have to dink around with weird YAML files and proc files, and let's not worry about it. Use Forge.
That's one thing with Forge is you're not locked into a vendor. You can swap your vendors out however you want and just re-push out a new box.
Well, vendors, not to mention just like package control. You don't have traditional SSH with Pagoda Box and Heroku. They're weird, almost like container-based environments, and it's more work than it's worth. And if all you have is a cheap
I
site,
think their target was to make scaling simple, but in that process they made the rest of the process more difficult.
And Taylor solved scaling with the load balancers.
Yay, Taylor!
I don't know. My buddy swears by Pagoda Box. I thought he said Nano Box the first time I was talking to him, but now I'm looking at it. I get to try it tomorrow. I get to go over to his business tomorrow and look at it. But if you're so far away from convention that you don't have to use SSH, that's kind of weird. I don't know. It's just kind of too much.
Yeah, you don't even get SSH, and you have to. It's just weird. That's weird.
Yeah, like I'd be much more comfortable tinkering around if something broke. With,
right.
The tools that you grew up on.
Now, I will say, as somebody who's been working with Docker a lot lately, the beauty of some of that is that some people will deliver an app with all of that already in place. So, for instance, I'm running a GitLab in a Docker container, and it's already configured. You can go in and tweak a couple config variables, but all the software is installed, all that's organized. So, if somebody released a software with Pagoda Box files in the repository pre-configured that you could use it as an app in a box, great. But when you have to go through and build it yourself for just a small project, it's not worth it.
I need to get more into Docker. That's a long story short.
Yeah,
I hear lots of good things.
Hit me up. I will show you some really cool things.
He will show you. Yeah, no, he has Docker experience. Believe me.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah, I will definitely take you up on that.
So I think what we'll do for today is we'll wrap it up. We're approaching our hour here. We'll try and keep it under an hour or at the hour. The last question I want to ask is, this was something we started talking about before we started. Dylan, he also has this hoodie. Adam, do you?
No, but I have another one. Hold on, I'll go get it.
I have another one too. Hacktoberfest 2015.
Okay, so this is the one that I have.
Oh,
I feel like I just put up a gang sign.
Can anybody make a gang sign with this?
No, we should have like a big picnic or something. No, that's called LaraCon. That's right. That's our like gang reunion.
Pretty much. All right, guys. Well, thank you again so much for popping on. We'll be online in the Slack channel and, of course, Twitter. So until next week, thank you so much.
Thanks. See you guys.